I'm going to share my screen now. Did the screen come up okay?
It did.
Okay. All right. You want to mute everybody and I'll unmute myself, Val?
Yes, sir. We are ready.
Women of Valor, World War II, Part A. This program tells the lives and accomplishments of select women who persevered while overcoming great adversity and created pathways and opportunities for others. World War II. World War II was a global war. It lasted from 1939 to 1945, but it began long before that in Europe and in Asia. It was the most widespread war in history and directly involved more than 100 million people from more than 30 different countries. It was the deadliest conflict in history, resulting in an estimated 50 to 85 million fatalities. FDR, 32nd President of the United States, served 4 terms, the last one obviously incomplete because he passed away. Excuse me for 1 minute, I've got to stop the phone. I'm so sorry. Continuing. Many Americans took an increasingly hard line towards getting involved in World War II. World War I had caused feelings of isolationism and passage of neutrality acts. However, hopes of isolationism were being dimmed by other world events. Totalitarianism in USSR, Italy, Germany, and Spain, and a move towards fascism in Japan. Germany's continuing expansion in Europe, revolution in Spain, and of course the worldwide Great Depression. And debts from World War I allies not being paid back. The break in American isolationism began with various actions which allowed the U.S. to sell arms to Great Britain. Hitler continued to expand, taking Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, and Belgium, and then in June 1940 taking France. The U.S., becoming nervous, began to build its military. The Battle of Atlantic began with German U-boats wreaking havoc. This battle would continue throughout the war. The real event that changed America into a nation at war was the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, followed by a declaration of war against Germany and Italy and a war on 2 fronts, Europe and the Pacific. Britain and France at war with Germany. U.S. declares war after Pearl Harbor. Nazi Germany threatens to exterminate the Jews. It was no secret. German army invades Poland. Axis declares war on America. and of course Mussolini and Hitler. This song was a popular song during the war. It was actually written by Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger, which is kind of ironic because both Pete and Woody were anti-war activists. But they wrote this song, and we used to sing it in grammar school. Wish I had a bushel, wish I had a peck, wish I had old Hitler with rope around his neck. Round and round Hitler's grave, round and round we go. We're gonna lay that poor boy down, he won't get up no more. Mussolini won't last long, I'll tell you the reason why. We're gonna salt his beef and hang it up to dry. I'm going to Berlin, to Mr. Hitler's town. I'm gonna take my 44, blow his playhouse down. Round and round Hitler's grave, round and round we go. We're gonna lay that poor boy down, he won't get up no more. Hitler went to Russia in search of Russian oil, but the only oil he found there is a pot in which he boiled. Round and round Hitler's grave, round and round we go. Gonna lay that poor boy down, he won't get up no more. I Want You, the iconic poster. The world changed. From a nation hovering on the edge of battle, we became a nation engaged in battle. Arms manufacturing sacrificed the citizens at every level. But most importantly, the building of a military force, more than 16 million men and women, many in their teens, and few with any prior military training. Our armed force before this was about 250,000. From 250,000 to 16 million. There were many heroes and heroines in this endeavor. No singular presentation can do justice to all the men and women in the U.S. and around the world who made the ultimate sacrifice and accomplished heroic deeds. This presentation is only an attempt to present a perspective of select women of valor, whose contributions changed our world and created paths and opportunities for others to follow. And of course this song, the famous song by George M. Cohan, written during World War I and revived at the request of FDR. Over there, send the word over there, that the Yanks are coming, the drums rum-tumming everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer, send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over, and we won't come back till it's over there. We can do it. Rosie the Riveter. Conditions were sometimes harsh and pay not equal. Nevertheless, Rosie convinced women of their patriotic duty to enter the workforce. While accomplishing great strides and achievements in our military buildup, the changes were not necessarily lasting. When the war was over, returning veterans replaced the Rosies. Rosie the Riveter. One woman factory worker in particular became a legend. With a partner, Rosina di Bonavita assembled in one shift an entire wing of a torpedo bomber, ramming in a record 3,345 rivets. This and other Herculean feats of production caused her to become famous as Rosie the Riveter. There were many Rosies, though. The iconic Saturday Evening Post. Of course, in the early days, the women went to work in their nice dresses. That changed. It was dangerous. Women operating a turret lathe. Women at work on a bomber in Douglas Aircraft Company in Long Beach, California. I was in that plant. My uncle worked there, and we were there in 1944, and we visited. It was amazing how large it was. Sub spotted, let 'em have it, lend a hand, enlist in the Navy. An Armed Air Force recruiting poster. Give us lumber for more PT boats. The PT boats was a very unusual boat. It's one of the fastest boats on the water. It's made of balsa wood. It was so lightweight and so fragile, but boy, it was fast. That, of course, you know, PT 109, the famous PT boat by JFK. To have and to hold war bonds, we have just begun to fight. The fight throughout the Pacific. Freedom from fear, ours to fight for. Where our men are fighting, our food is fighting. Buy wisely, cook carefully, store carefully, use leftovers. Rosie inspired a social movement that increased the number of working women from 12 to 20 million from 1940 to 44. They filled factory and non-factory positions in every sector of the economy. They proved that they could do a man's job and do it well. In addition, African American women working side by side with whites began to change social barriers. During World War II, 600,000 African American women entered the wartime Air Force. Previously, black women's work in the United States was largely limited to domestic service and agricultural work. And war and wartime industries meant new and better paying opportunities, if they made it through the hiring process, that is. White women were the targets of the U.S. government's propaganda efforts as embodied in the lasting and lauded image of Rosie the Riveter. Though largely ignored in America's popular history of World War II, black women's important contributions in World War II factories, which weren't always so welcoming, are stunningly captured in these comparably rare snapshots of black Rosie the Riveters. A Rosie working on the Vengeance bomber in Nashville, Tennessee. Though wartime work offered new and better paying employment opportunities for black women, they were at the bottom of an unspoken hiring racial hierarchy. White men who weren't in the military, single white women, married white women, black men, and finally, black women. Virtually invisible in the mainstream media were the 600,000 women out of 1 million African Americans who were in the wartime labor force. The 4,000 African American WACs, the African Americans in the Army Nurse Corps, the Women's on Social Action Committees who held communities together, the civil rights activists pressing for integration of public facilities and better housing, the students studying to be lawyers, doctors, teachers, or scientists, and the performing artists who gained critical acclaim during the war years. Mary McLeod Bethune, president of the National Association of Colored Women and founder of the National Council of Negro Women, publicized the availability of new job opportunities through black women's clubs and publications and promoted greater opportunities for women of color as a consultant to U.S. government agencies on labor matters and female officer candidates. By 1944, demand for labor was so great that Pullman for the first time hired black women in production jobs at the shipyard. Previously, black women had been restricted to low-level cafeteria and janitorial positions. Although President Franklin Roosevelt excluded racial discrimination in war plants under Executive Order 8802, racially motivated strikes took place nonetheless. In 1943, for instance, 22 white women walked out of a Baltimore Western Electric plant to protest the hiring of black women in their department. Many Rosies returned to being homemakers, but the reality was proven. Women could do what men could do, and while change did not occur immediately and perhaps not really beginning in the 70s, what was accomplished in our military buildup could never have been done without the millions of Rosies. Here's a brief summary of what was done. This list is amazing. In 3.5 years, I won't go reading through, just scan through this list. We won the war with 16.1 million men and women in uniform in over 3.5 years. Built 22 aircraft carriers, 203 submarines, 100,000 fighter aircraft. And the great story behind this is the factories were converted. A shirt plant might become a builder of aircraft. A toy factory might become a builder of mortars. It was a remarkable story. And then, VE Day. after 3.5 years. And then the Japs surrender. And then peace. And then, of course, the famous Kilroy. And that iconic poster. They're still trying to figure out who those people were. All of the millions of Rosies and all the women who preserved the home front were truly women of valor. And we honor the women who went to war. Almost 400,000 women served in with the armed forces. They served in the Nurse Corps, the WACs, the WAVES, the SPARs, the Marine Corps Reserves, the WASP, the American Red Cross, the USO, and the Civil Air Patrol. This is a song, great song. It's written by Joe Bonsall, one member of the Oak Ridge Boys, a great country and western group. Joe Bonsall wrote the song about his mother and father, G.I. Joe and Lily. He was a streetwise kid from Philly, just 19 and 44. Joined up in Uncle's army, hit the beach and fought a war. A decorated hero, he never talks about those days. Because of guys like G.I. Joe, our country's free today. She was Women's Army Corps, raised in Carolina dirt, escorting wounded young men home from a burning hell on earth. The first time that she saw him, he was broken and alone. Lily fell in love that day when he winked and said hello. And Lily sang this song to G.I. Joe. Let me hold you in my arms, handsome soldier. Take my hand, for we are going home today. Let me kiss away your fears, let me pray away your fears. I'll stay here with you till they carry us away. They married in the spring, dressed up in army green, took out a loan, bought a home, raised a family. The war returned to G.I. Joe in 1965. The old wounds came back to haunt him, but Lily's love kept him alive. Now they're living in a veteran's home. They've both grown old and gray. The medals earned so long ago now hang there in a case. Sometimes she finds him weeping as they lay there in his bed. The distant sounds of battle still echo in his head. And Lily sings this song to G.I. Joe. Let me hold you in my arms, handsome soldier. Take my hand, for we are going home today. Let me kiss away your fears, let me pray away your tears. I'll stay here with you till they carry us away. Someday they'll rest in Arlington, 'neath the red, white, and blue, safe in the arms of Jesus when their journey here is through. An American love story, not unlike a lot of others, except that G.I. Joe and Lily is my father and my mother. And a child shall lead them. Anne Frank was born June 12, 1929, and died in March 1945. She is one of the most discussed Jewish victims of the Holocaust. Her diary, The Diary of a Young Girl, has been the basis for many plays and films. In spite of being born in Germany, Anne's father lost his citizenship and they moved to the Netherlands. When the Germans occupied the Netherlands, the Franks were trapped. As persecution increased, the family went into hiding for 2 years until they were betrayed and sent to concentration camps. All of the family died except for Father Otto. Otto Frank saved the diary that consecrated Anne's life of 2 years in hiding and the tragic events which had served as an inspiration to others. She gained international fame posthumously after her diary was published. It documents her experiences hiding during the German occupation of the Netherlands in World War II. A child, but truly a woman of valor. There was a special on, I think it was 60 Minutes, just last week, where a group of forensic detectives discovered who was the persons who actually turned them in. It was A terrible, terrible story, but at least someone found out. World War II, a woman of valor, Roseville, born in 1898, died in 1980. You may remember this movie, The Monuments Men, with George Clooney, Matt Damon, Bill Murray, John Goodman, a really good movie, telling a tremendous story. The story of The Monuments Men was told in the book by Robert Edsel in the movie the same name. The movie was directed, produced, and starred in by actor George Clooney and tells a very compelling story. Based on the true story of the greatest treasure hunt in history, an unlikely World War II, tasked by FDR with going into Germany to rescue artistic masterpieces from Nazi thieves and returning them to their rightful owners, many of them who were Jewish families. Roseville is one of the greatest and yet unknown heroines of World War II. She risked her life spying on the Nazis for 4 years while working with the French resistance. In the movie, she's played by Kate Blanchett. Asked to work with the Nazis, she secretly recorded details of the Nazi plundering of National Friends and private Jewish-owned art from France. She was the daughter of a blacksmith, but a gifted student. She studied art, graduating with multiple degrees and becoming an art curator at a French museum. When the Germans occupied France and began to plunder art, Rose began secretly recording the details, keeping secret the fact that she understood German. She provided details to the resistance so they would not blow up the trains that were carrying the art. Because the Nazis photographed every object they stole, she pocketed the negatives as she left each night and made copies of them. On 4 occasions, the Nazis became suspicious of her and threw her out. Yet each time she managed to return and continue spying. After the war, Valland went to Germany and stayed there until 1954, scouring Germany to recover some 70,000 pieces of art. She became an underground negotiator entering Soviet-occupied Germany to recover art that the communists considered theirs. And that's Rose Valland and Kate Blanchett. Look at that piece of art, that sculpture. Look how large it was. And how many pieces. Rose Valland became the central pillar of the security of France's museums. In her lifetime, she was never given the credit for her remarkable accomplishments, even though her deeds placed her at great personal risk. Rose Valland truly is a woman of valor. When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah, we'll give him a hearty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah. The men will cheer and the boys will shout, the ladies they will all turn out, we'll all feel gay when Johnny comes marching home. The old church bell will peal with joy, hurrah, hurrah, to welcome home our darling boy, hurrah, hurrah. The village lads and lassies say, with roses they will strew the way, we'll all feel gay when Johnny comes marching home. When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah, we'll give him a hearty welcome and hurrah, hurrah. The men will cheer and the boys will shout, the ladies they will all turn out, we'll all feel gay when Johnny comes marching home. World War II, a woman of valor, Irina Sendler. Born in Poland, 1910, died at the age of 98. She was a social worker, humanitarian, and a legend. She was a Roman Catholic. She was born in 1910 to a physician and his wife. Her father died in 1917 from typhus, contracted from patients, some of whom were Jewish. In gratitude, Jewish leaders helped to pay for Sendler's education. She was married twice and had 3 children, 2 of whom died. She died in 2008, being survived by one daughter, Janina. She was a Polish nurse social worker who served in the Polish underground, called Zagota, during World War II. Assisted by 24 others, she smuggled some 2,500 Jewish children out of the Warsaw Ghetto, providing them with false documents and with housing, and saving those children from the Holocaust. This is a Nazi poster threatening death to any Pole who aided the Jews. Children were placed with Polish families in Catholic convents and orphanages. The children were placed wherever they could be kept safe, and Irina and her cohorts buried lists of the hidden children in jars so that they could eventually be returned to their Jewish relatives. The Nazis eventually discovered her activities. They tortured her and sentenced her to death. She was beaten by the Gestapo, breaking her feet and legs, but she refused to betray any of her comrades or the children. Just before she was to be executed by a firing squad, she was rescued by the Zagota, who bribed her captors, who listed her as being executed. For the remainder of the war, she lived in hiding but continued her work for the Jewish children. After the war, she and her co-workers gathered together all their records of the names and locations of the hidden Jewish children. The Zagota and the Central Committee of Polish Jews learned that most of the parents had been killed at the camps or gone missing. But most importantly, the children had been saved. She was recognized by the State of Israel and given Poland's highest honor for her wartime humanitarian efforts. This is a picture of her with some of the people she saved as children. This was taken in Warsaw in 2005, 50 years after the war ended. You can imagine what that scene must have been. Irina Sendler, truly, truly a woman of valor. You're a grand old flag, you're a high-flying flag, forever in peace may you wave. You're the emblem of the land I love, the home of the free and the brave. Every heart beats true beneath the red, white, and blue, and there's never a boast or brag. Should old acquaintance be forgot, keep your eye on the grand old flag. This concludes this program. Thank you very much for coming. And I'll stop sharing, and if you have any comments or thoughts, I'd love to hear them.
You know, Brant, you've got several people here that haven't been in the past. I just want to say hello to them and welcome them. I'm so glad they're here. What would you like to, I think sometimes it's important. Why do you pick the women you pick?
That's an interesting story. I think because they were in their way underdogs, or just really in a sense so committed to doing something, even though when I think of Roseville Land working with the Nazis every day of her life and every day making copies of these things so that she could protect these treasures. I mean, what courage. I mean, it's amazing to me. And Roseville Land, the same thing. They put themselves at risk, not for any personal gain or anything like that. To me, it's just a remarkable story. And there are so many others. I mean, that I do another program, which is Part B of Women of Valor, and people, in most cases, you've never heard of. I mean, we all know Julia Childs, but do we realize how important she was? Like the #2 person in the OSS, the predecessor organization of the CIA. Who knew? I mean, this, as I say, some of the stories are just amazing, even in my opinion, made more amazing because we really don't know these stories and haven't celebrated these women.
Brant, it's BJ. Thank you so much for all of your programs and all your hard work and digging up those people that, like you said, I didn't know that about Julia.
Yes.
And I didn't know about Hedy Lamarr until you presented that.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
I was
awesome.
fascinated by all of that.
Well, thanks, BJ. It's nice. I can't see you, but I know you're there.
Yeah, I'm still in my pajamas. I have to stay in them so I won't get out and do things. And I need to stay at home and work here.
Yeah. If anybody has any other thoughts or comments or suggestions for other women, I'm always open to those. And I said there's another great story which I tell in the second part of a woman named Cornelia Fort. I can't imagine there are many people who've heard of Cornelia Fort. She's a 24-year-old. She was one of the first female pilots. In fact, she was the first one who was attacked by the Japanese at Pearl Harbor. And her story is a remarkable one. But I'll tell that another day.
Yay. Ruh-roh.
If anybody was sleeping, they're awake now.
Yeah. Hey, Brad.
Hello? Auto insurance rates have dropped up to 50% in your area. Based on your zip code, you could potentially see.
Hey, Brent, you've gotten several people to join late. Can you take a few minutes maybe for these folks that have joined late to kind of give them a little heads up about your next program, or anybody in particular like today that you would like for them to know about, or any information you would like to share with these folks? You know, our folks don't ever get any place on time. I hate to tell you that, Brent. So,
Well, I haven't figured out exactly what program I'll be doing next month, but it certainly is going to be something that be celebrating Black History Month, and then in March, of course, is Women's History Month, so I'll certainly be doing a program in that vein as well. But and there's so many of them. But and again, if anybody ever has any suggestions or stories that they think should be told, please let me know. That and I'm happy to do those.
How about the Rockford Peaches?
Say that again.
The Rockford Peaches.
Oh yeah, that's a great story. Definitely is.
Brant, I cannot think of her name right this minute. The Black lady who's, all I can say is her cells that they studied when she had cancer are still living and reproducing, and they're experimenting. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yes, I do, and I just can't.
Henrietta Lack.
Yeah.
Yes. That would be interesting.
Yes. Along the
and
way.
you know, Brent, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if anybody gets any particular ideas, I love doing stories about women because in almost every case, they not only had to exist in an adversarial environment, in many cases it was the men who were giving them the most pressure. That's why the stories are also compelling.
I agree. And you know, and this is totally off subject, but I was one of our instructors, Ricardo Aponte, you know, is the choreographer of the Alliance in many places. He's got a play at Aurora right now, so I thought I'd go see what it was about. What I discovered is that at Aurora there is a play done on Shirley Chisholm, the first Black woman to ever run for president of the United States.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I thought, well, who knew?
Yes, exactly right. Or you know that the very first president of the United States actually was a black man. He was elected in the 1780s, and I forgot his name. But
Well, that's an interesting story in itself.
it sure is.
That is interesting. But you know, but it is, you know, the other thing too is that so many times women made such important contributions and didn't get credit
No.
because for many reasons. And you have told that story time and time again.
No, it's so true.
But we can do the job.
Yeah,
We got it.
that's what we know for sure. That's exactly right. So anyway, well, thank you all for coming. Please stay safe, and we'll get out of this thing eventually, and hope to see you again next month. And again, please stay safe and follow all the rules, even though they're confusing.
And let Brent know if you ever have anything you want him to do
Yes.
some research on and to share, because he loves doing this.
Yeah.
You guys have no idea the conversations I have with him about this. He loves it. And of course, he's got a strong woman in his house every day.
You bet. And don't say she's my better half. That's not true. She's my better 2/3.
There you go.
Boy, she's lucky to have you.
Oh.
We're both pretty lucky.
Yeah, that's true. It's a good partnership.
Both pretty lucky. Well, thank you all for coming again. See you
We'll
next month.
see you
Thank
next
you.
month.
Thanks, Al. Yeah,
Stay safe.
thanks, Brent.
Thank you.